Welcome to our next installment of the subject matter Diminished Capacity and Elder Abuse. This is Jake Fector, Compliance Manager. In today's course, we're going to identify the signs of diminished capacity and hopefully go over some escalation procedures for advisors to implement when and if they are faced with a client suffering from some type of diminished capacity. First, we're going to take a look at the relationship between financial capacity and cognitive decline. So when we think about defining financial capacity, again, just to level set with what we're really talking about here, activity that consists of someone having the ability to independently manage their financial affairs in a manner consistent with their personal self-interest and values. And so going a step further when thinking about financial capacity, it's really not just the performance skills. So something like being able to count currency, complete a check, pay a bill. It's also the judgment side of things. So being able to know and optimize that a financial plan is in your self-interest and to do so independently. One of the main sources in this area, the Handbook of the Psychology of the Aging, has 6 measurements of the domains of financial activity. And you see those on the screen here, right? Things like basic monetary skills, the ability to process cash transactions, having good financial judgment. Again, when we think about defining financial capacity, these are 6 characteristics that someone should have to be able to say that they are financially capable of making good decisions. But let's think about what makes someone having a diminished sense of financial capacity, right? So the lapse of having those things. We've just established the baseline for financial capacity. It then becomes a little easier for us to identify what is diminished or weakened financial capacity. I have some examples on the screen here. But again, I think using some case studies of what we've seen can sometimes be helpful too. Situations where a client may not be able to understand the consequences of their decision, right? Thinking about a grandson of a client asking grandpa to wire money for his next latest business venture, right? Nothing that's come up in our planning discussions. An older client may not be able to see really the long-term consequences of those types of investments. Another good example might be someone not being able to understand basic financial concepts, like what their allocation to equity and fixed income means from a risk standpoint in achieving their long-time goals. And so again, someone with diminished financial capacity doesn't have the ability to really independently operate on their own and be confident in communicating their decisions to others. So when we think about normal aging and cognitive decline, sort of how all this fits together, again, cognitive decline is a normal part of everyone's aging. Everyone goes through some basic level of memory loss, some basic level of the inability to access bits of information in their brain. And again, that's normal as someone gets older. However, what we want to be on the lookout for is sort of more severe forms of cognitive impairment. When someone does go through something more serious in cognitive decline, it could be an early sign of onset Alzheimer's. And again, this really could be an early warning sign of things way worse to come for our clients. Someone going through some type of cognitive decline may not be able to recognize that their abilities are actually impaired, and they may not be in a position to, again, independently manage their financial affairs in their best interest, which again sort of gets to one of our next feature topics in another slideshow we'll be going over, which is elder abuse, where someone oftentimes close to a client or close to an elder person recognizes that this individual does not have the appropriate financial capacity and actually preys on that vulnerability. So when comparing cognitive decline and diminished capacity, while certainly they are similar in nature, Diminished capacity and cognitive decline are not necessarily the same thing, and so I thought it'd be helpful to break those down. Again, we've gone over the definition of what diminished financial capacity have: someone not having the ability to understand basic financial concepts or independently act on their own in their accounts. When we think about cognitive decline or mild cognitive impairment, you'll see that term in the industry, and some of the health experts use that abbreviation of MCI. Oftentimes, again, close family and friends may be able to notice a change in a client's behavior, but it's short-term memory loss, mental function slipping a little bit. These changes in behavior aren't so much severe that they don't really significantly impact or interfere with someone's daily life or their usual activities. However, as I mentioned, as someone gets older, these mild cognitive impairments may begin to increase and may lead to things like dementia or Alzheimer's disease. But again, sometimes some people with mild cognitive impairments really just have a baseline of some mental lapses, but oftentimes just operate with old age, right? They still are able to get around and still are able to function just okay. But oftentimes, and why we think about these two concepts together, diminished financial capacity, if you look at some of the research, is usually one of the first signs of a client going through some type of cognitive decline, right? And that should make sense. Financial capacity is one of the more complicated aspects of someone's mental capacity. Because of that, it's often one of the first things that breaks down and can actually be a leading indicator that someone may be suffering from more severe cases of mild cognitive impairment like dementia or Alzheimer's, which puts our advisors candidly in an interesting spot, right? So we are on the front lines of identifying possible diminished capacity, and we have a responsibility to our clients, right, as fiduciaries to act in their best interest. And so being on the front lines is actually a very important role that our advisors and our associates do play. I showed some numbers on the screen here. As of March of 2020, the time of this production of this video, Buckingham has over 3,500 clients who are deemed to be 65 or older, right, in that age of our population that might be suffering from some type of diminished capacity or cognitive decline. It also makes up $7 billion in our assets under management. So again, we're talking about a large portion of our clients and someone that can be impacted here. The numbers from our really general U.S. population, that it's estimated that 20% of adults 65 or older have some type of mild cognitive impairment. So again, look at your client base. You can determine pretty easily, again, 1 in 5 clients who you have that are 65 or older do suffer from some type of MCI, forgetting things more frequently, losing train of thought, maybe being impulsive or showing poor judgment. So it really is our duty as advisors to start recognizing some of those signs early and often to try to help our clients. So what are some of the warning signs of diminished capacity, and what can we do to hopefully be prepared to help our clients through that and make sure we're both protecting our clients and protecting Buckingham as a firm as well? I've got sort of the 10 warning signs that we think about of diminished capacity on the screen here. I won't go through all of them. I'll pick out a few and just give some real case examples of them. One here, inconsistent decision making with current long-term goals. Right, a client all of a sudden is going against their IPS that's been in place for years and is looking to either change allocation or go totally off the reservation with a specific sort of niche or private investment. Number 4, lack of awareness of recent completed financial transactions. Thinking about that in a real world case, right? Someone questioning why regular transactions are occurring in their account. Let's say we are just doing some rebalancing within the account. They're questioning every decision or every transaction, and they never really have before. Forgetfulness, we see this a lot with some of our older clients. Cases of a client calling in the next day and completely forgetting about what they may have talked about at the client meeting the day before. So again, just general forgetfulness could be a trait here. And then lastly, erratic behavior or irrational trading activity. Again, all of a sudden, a client who has a rather conservative allocation may really want to crank up their equity allocation and take on extra risk when it may not be warranted. So again, we've got a list of warning signs here. So all good things for our advisors to keep in mind. But what should someone do, or what should an advisor think about in terms of escalation procedures? So we've got a couple of steps on the screen here. First and foremost, we always recommend our advisors get others involved, right? Whether that's your advisory team leader, other team leaders, a member of our compliance and legal team. It's always great to have more than one person or more than just a set of advisors on one team thinking about the ramifications of a client going through some type of diminished capacity issue. Second step that we usually recommend is kind of take inventory of the documentation we have in place. Right, so think about trusted contact forms, power of attorney forms, any other type of guardianship appointments that may be on file. Check with the custodians and their documentation. If we do have a Buckingham trusted contact form on file, think about possibly reaching out to that trusted contact if we want to get a third party's input on sort of how a client's doing currently. Next would be to really carefully review the authority in place for any parties who are able to act on a client's behalf. One of the big trends in elder abuse is someone, maybe a family member or a caretaker, getting a power of attorney for a client and actually being able to transfer funds without them knowing. So what we want to make sure we have a pulse on is who has the authority to move money, which gets to some of these next two alerts of utilizing an alert in Salesforce, alerting your whole team, making sure they're aware, making notes and taking good notes and tracking this, and then getting custodians involved. We've had cases where we, as our legal and compliance team, thought there was possible diminished capacity going on with one of our Buckingham clients. We reached out to our custodian partners. We were able to get on the phone with the client together and actually go through a series of out-of-wallet security questions that the client had to answer on the phone in order to approve a pending transaction that we thought might be someone taking advantage of a client. So again, there's plenty of resources out there. The big ask here is just to get others involved, utilize our team, utilize the custodian partners we have, and just make sure that we're really being careful and thoughtful in our approach when treating clients here. What are some other ways to help clients with diminished capacity or hopefully prevent and mitigate this risk across sort of the clients that you work with? Number one, have the tough conversations before the tough times come. What we mean with that line is when and if possible, start getting your house in order really before a client crosses that 65-year-old threshold. So getting beneficiaries in order, getting power of attorneys straightened out, getting estate paperwork in line. The more prep work we can do when someone's younger, oftentimes it just becomes an easier client touch point when we have to bring up possible situations of diminished capacity later on. Again, planning now is often something that we try to stress as well. Thinking about estate planning, long-term care, transition planning, getting the sons or daughters of a client involved, sort of that next-gen planning, that naturally flows into some of these conversations. And the more we can plan, the more we can strategize, the more we can make sure that we have really good controls in place, the better position we are to protect our clients and protect Buckingham as a firm. And then lastly, just identify maybe some of your target clients. Again, most of the organizations that you'll see in our space define an elderly client or someone who may begin to start having mild cognitive impairment at that 65-year-old. So I had some of the numbers earlier in some of these slides, but take inventory of your clients. Make sure that at a bare minimum you do have the appropriate documentation in place for those clients who are 65 years or older. But also just think about putting all of this into your regular progress meetings, making sure that we're having these conversations early and often. It's never really easy to have these types of conversations with clients, but the earlier they happen, the more we can plan for it, the better off we are, so that we're not left in a tough spot of someone going through a stint of diminished capacity and not having any levers to pull or any help to provide from our side as their fiduciary advisor.